Hi guys, I was thinking about what story I wanted to share with you next, and I remembered this one fairy tale that I loved growing up. I asked to have it read to me like every day between ages 6 and 9. I think originally it was an Aesop's fable, but the version that I always read was from Gail Carson Levine in her compilation of short stories. And so I was looking all over my shelves trying to find my copy of it, and I could only find volume 2 of the Princess Tales, which didn't have the short story that I wanted to share with you. So I got out my Kindle and I found it on there, and so I thought together we could read The Fairy's Mistake. Chapter 1. Once upon a time, in the village of Snettering-on-Snokes, in the kingdom of Biddle, Rosella fetched water from the well for the 4088th time. Rosella always fetched the water because her identical twin sister, Myrtle, always refused to go, and their mother, the widow Pickering, never made Myrtle go. She never made her do anything. Instead, she made Rosella do everything. At the well, the fairy Ethelinda was having a drink, and when she saw Rosella coming, she changed herself into an old lady, and then made herself look very thirsty. "Would you like a drink, grandmother?" Rosella said. "That would be lovely, dearie." Rosella lowered her wooden bucket into the well, and when she lifted it out, she held out the dipper so the old lady could drink. Ethelinda slurped the water. "Thank you. Your kindness merits a reward. From now, you don't have to." Rosella stopped. Something funny was happening in her mouth. Had she lost a tooth? There was something hard under her tongue, and something hard in her cheek. "Excuse me." Now there was something in her other cheek. She spat delicately into her hand. They weren't teeth. She was holding a diamond and 2 opals. "There, dearie," Ethelinda smiled. "Isn't that nice?" Chapter 2. "What took you so long?" Myrtle said when Rosella got home. "Your sister almost perished from thirst. You lazy bones," their mother said. "I gave a drink to—" Something was in Rosella's mouth again. It was between her lip and front teeth this time. "I gave a drink to an old lady." An emerald and a diamond fell out of her mouth, and they landed on the dirt floor of the cottage. "What's that?" Myrtle said. "What's that?" the widow said, and they both dove for the jewels, but Myrtle got there first. "Rosella, darling," the widow said, "sit down, make yourself comfortable. Tell us all about it. Don't leave anything out." There wasn't much to tell, only enough to cover the bottom of Myrtle's teacup with gems. "Which way did the old lady go?" Myrtle asked. Rosella was puzzled. "She didn't go anywhere." An amethyst dropped into the teacup. Myrtle grabbed the bucket and ran. And when she saw Myrtle in the distance, Ethelinda thought Rosella had come back. Only this time she wasn't tripping lightly down the path, smelling flowers and humming a tune. She was hurtling along, head down, arms swinging, bucket flying. And then Ethelinda's fairy powers told her that this was Rosella's twin sister. Ethelinda got ready by turning herself into a knight. "Where'd the old lady go?" Myrtle asked when she got to the well. "I haven't seen anyone. I've been all alone, hoping some maiden would come by and help me with a drink. I can't do it myself in all this armor." "What's in it for me if I do?" The fairy tilted her head and her armor clanked. "The happiness of helping someone in need?" "Well, in that case, get your page to do it." And Myrtle stomped off. Ethelinda turned herself back into a fairy. "Your rudeness merits a punishment," she said, but Myrtle was too far away to hear. Myrtle went through the whole village of Snettering-on-Snokes looking for the old lady. The villagers knew who she was by her scowl and the way she acted. Myrtle marched into shops and right into people's houses. She opened doors to rooms and even closets, and whenever anyone yelled at her, the only answer was the slam of her door on the way out. While Myrtle was in the village, Rosella went out to the garden to pick peas for dinner, and as she worked, she sang. While she sang, gems dropped from her mouth. It still felt funny, but she was getting used to it. Except once she popped a pea into her mouth as she sang, and she almost broke her tooth on a ruby. Rosella had a sweet voice, but Prince Harold, who happened to be riding by, wasn't musical. He wouldn't have stopped, except he spotted a sapphire trembling on Rosella's lip, and he watched it tumble into the vegetables. He tied up his horse at the Widow Pickering's fence. Rosella didn't see him. She just went on singing. Harold went into the garden. Maiden! Rosella looked up from her peas. A man? A nobleman! She blushed prettily. She wasn't bad looking, Prince Harold thought. Pardon me, he said. You've dropped some jewels. Allow me. Oh, don't trouble yourself, sir. Another sapphire and a moonstone fell out of Rosella's mouth. Harold had a terrible thought. Maybe they were just glass. He picked up a stone. May I examine this? Rosella nodded. It didn't look like glass. It looked like a perfect diamond, 5 carats at least. But if the gems were real, why was she leaving them on the ground? He held up a jewel. Maiden, is this really a diamond? I don't know, sir. It might be. A topaz hit Prince Harold in the forehead, and he caught it as it bounced off his chin. Maiden, have jewels always come out of your mouth? Rosella laughed, a lovely tinkling sound. Oh, no, sir. Only began this afternoon when an old lady, I think she may have been a fairy. They were real then. Harold knelt before her. Maiden, I'm Prince Harold, and I love you madly. Will you marry me? Chapter 3. Rosella didn't love the prince madly, but she liked him. He was so polite. She thought it might be pleasanter to be a princess than the Widow Pickering's daughter and Myrtle's sister. Besides, it could be against the law to say no to a prince. So she said yes, and dropped a garnet into his hand. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I didn't hear you. Yes, your highness. Clink, clink. 2 more garnets joined Harold's collection. You must say yes, Harold, now that we're betrothed. Yes, Harold. Clink. The fairy Ethelinda was delighted that Rosella was going to be a princess. She deserves it, the fairy thought, and was so pleased with herself for having given Rosella the perfect reward. The Widow Pickering agreed to the marriage, but she insisted that Harold must leave all the gems that Rosella had produced before their engagement, and the widow was careful not to mention Myrtle. She didn't want the prince to know that Rosella had a twin sister who might also have a jewel mine in her mouth. After all, what if he took Myrtle away too? Prince Harold swung Rosella up onto his horse. He asked her to hold open a saddle-bag on her lap. Then he mounted in front of her, and as they rode off, he asked her about the garden, about the weather, about fly fishing, about anything. The widow stood at the fence waving her handkerchief, and as she turned to go back into the cottage, she saw her favorite daughter in the distance. Myrtle was loping along, swinging the bucket. The widow opened the gate and followed her daughter inside the house. Darling, speak to me. Myrtle sank into their only comfortable chair. Hi, Mom. The stupid old lady wasn't. There was a tickle in the back of her throat. What was going on? It felt like her tongue had gotten loose and was flopping around in her mouth. Could she be making jewels too? Did it just happen by going to the well? Whatever it was, diamond, pearl, or emerald, it wanted to get out. Myrtle opened her mouth. A garter snake slithered out. The widow screamed and jumped on the other chair. Eek! Get that thing out of here! Myrtle! She pointed a shaking finger. There it is! Get it! Eek! Myrtle didn't budge. She stared at the snake coiling itself around a bedpost. How would this happen if the old lady wasn't at the well? The knight! The old lady had turned herself into a knight. Myrtle jumped up and raced out, taking the bucket with her. Bye, Mom, she called over her shoulder. See you later. 2 mosquitoes and a dragonfly flew out of her mouth. The fairy Ethelinda watched Myrtle scurry down the path, and she patted herself on the back for having given Myrtle the perfect punishment. And that's the end of chapter 3. We'll pick up next time for part 2, and we'll see what happens